Do not make me give you a gavel.
Yeah, I know.
Just tap the mic.
I'm sure I was actually getting your attention. I'd like to call to order the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District. This meeting, this regular meeting of December 11th, 2019, the last meeting of 2019, which means next time will be 2020, which is a year that should be reserved for science fiction. The last, it is upon us. 2020. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business, it is my my privilege and pleasure to recognize the service and the commitment of Ray O'Rourke, who has served on the school board for 10 years, 8 of which I think
7.
7 is which.
all running together.
There we go. Correcting me all the way. So, which has trained me well. We just want to take this moment to thank you for the incredible amount of service that you've given to this community. And as an appreciation, the board would like to make a gift in your honor to the school. And I wanted to thank Laura for facilitating this. And I wanted to thank David Lilburn at Anapodian Books. So come on up, Ray, and see what is beneath the. It's not for you. It is in your name and in your honor.
I attempted to reach under this a little while ago. Got my hand slapped. So. Wow, that's a lot of words.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen this before,
An old OED. Look at that.
yeah, well, it's David.
Oh,
Yeah. So Ray's been known to pull out a few what are usually called SAT words, but they are well-trained Jesuit words from the podium, and we appreciate all his time and effort. So we thought it fitting to dedicate this OED to the school.
Well, that's very thoughtful. Thank you very much. When after I submitted my resignation and Dennis wrote the story, somebody, unnamed, commented on my years of service, something and something, and his vocabulary. So I've got to be remembered for something. I guess that's as good as anything.
Yeah. Congratulations,
Anyway,
Ray.
thank you all very much. I said when I resigned that it's been a privilege and a pleasure both to work with all of you. Some of you I haven't met yet, although I have absolute confidence in you in as much as you're going to be guided by a very strong leadership team here. And the only other thing I would say is tonight I get to do for the first thing something I've wanted to do for more than 10 years at board meeting, which is leave before even the consent agenda. Thank you all very much.
Before you part, though, we wanted to take this time to thank Laura for her years of service. And so, Courtney, maybe you want to do the honors?
Sure. We're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
You have some things.
Yeah.
But we've all just been thinking about our time working with you, and I imagine everybody has their own statement. But I have learned a great deal from you, and I am so honored to have had the chance to work with you and to see you make changes in the school for the better, take it to new places, and I'm really going to miss working with you. Thank you.
And
I look forward to seeing you around Beacon. I'll see you around Beacon.
And this is a little something from Flower Cup Wine Shop
Oh,
here
nice.
on Main Street to wash all that down with.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
and this is for you and your special one for an evening out.
Oh,
So
thank
yeah,
you very much.
yeah.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Do we have flowers? Is that possibly?
Sure. There's multiple flowers.
We have lots of flowers.
I like jelly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Just for taking
All right, this is the,
Thank you.
okay, should we adjourn the meeting now?
Yeah, we're good, right?
With that,
Yeah.
I bid you all a fond farewell. Happy holidays to all. Enjoy and best of luck for 2020 and beyond. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. I'm sure, as I said earlier, I'm fully confident it'll all be done brilliantly. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Oops.
Dasa?
Yes, so I'm proud to introduce our principal Alex Levine and Chris Lanchanton, our district counsel from Gervin and Palazzo. They are going to present DASA, procedural, law, and how it looks here in the Garrison School District, and ask questions along the way. This was a request by the board to learn more about DASA. So, Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, everyone. So what we will do, so for this evening, we thought this was for the board, and just in terms of for informational purposes, we have discussion and just an overview of DASA from a balcony overview lens. So Chris was kind enough to join us as well with her expertise, and then as it pertains to our specific district practices. So thank you very much. So we will go through, I'll go through basically the definition. I know you have the materials that I've shared with you. We'll then go into this from an in-depth legal perspective. Of course, as there are questions along the way, we'll be happy to discuss. And then we'll narrow it down more to the more specific practices within the district. And then as we've done before, just look at moving forward, what might be the implications or recommendations going forward in our practice. And I would like to, before we go further, there will be a couple of slides that in which Ms. Lois Gordon is referenced. I would just like to say thank you to her. We did attend. She is one of the facilitators through Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES for some of the DASA workshops. She was kind enough to share some of the information that you'll see noted in the corner, so thank you to her as well for some additional perspective and outside objective lens as well on this topic. So just a brief overview too. So DASA, which stands for the Dignity for All Students Act. This is New York State specific and signed officially in 2010, it's effective as of 2012. While each district is required to have, or each school rather is required to have a DASA coordinator, we have two of us. So I'm fortunate enough to work with Ms. Diego, our school counselor, on many of these matters, and I have found it to be a wonderful opportunity to collaborate, and then just in her experience and expertise in training, two heads are better than one, of course. So I do appreciate her time, and she was very helpful in forming some of the content of this presentation as well. And really the intent, school districts are to continue to create a safe and supportive learning environment for students. So that is the theme that we'll see. There are a number of quotes which I hate to be reading the quotes directly from the slides, but nonetheless, I think it's important to be specific and adhere to the language that of the law itself. And on that note, New York State's Dignity Act for All Students Act seeks to provide the state's public elementary and secondary students with a safe and supportive environment free from discrimination, intimidation, taunting, harassment, and bullying on school property, a school bus, and or at a school function. We will see later noted in the presentation that while this is a little bit narrower in its lens, this actually can in some instances on a case-by-case basis extend outside of the school walls as we live in a different time. So we'll go more into that, as I'm sure Chris will as well. That is, in the event there may be a nexus or a connection to anything that may be occurring outside of the school that may cause any kind of disruption to the educational environment. And just for your reference too, this will be shared publicly, of course. The links for additional reference are embedded within the presentation. And again, lengthy definitions, but again, legally is important. Material incidents, which I've referred to, of harassment and discrimination include but are not limited to threats, intimidation, or abuse based on a person's actual or perceived race, color, weight, national origin, ethnic group, religion, religious practices, disability, sexual orientation, gender, including gender identity or expression, or sex. And you will see that some of the language as of late has been, is constantly being adapted as we've adapted our policies here within the district You see the reference to identifying with regards to gender identity. Some of our recommendations going forward, of course, is as these things change, it's a constant, as our policy experts know, it's a constant evolving, updating process. So, and this is, I had mentioned, thank you to Lois Gordon, so again, experience in the legal realm, and share some of her presentations or some of her resources. So I think important to note that not necessarily while there are incidents that are reported, essentially the distinction, as we had attended training and in our conversations, whether it is DASA or an incident that is not classified as such, our procedures and process, if there is some kind of issue or concern, are exactly the same. The distinction here essentially is what is reported to the state in the form of a number in terms of how many incidents. The way in which we approach these things in our conversations with students, communication with parents, determining what are the next best steps in terms of steps going forward, that all remains the same regardless of whether it is a founded material incident or not, which I think is important and will probably be repeated over the course of this evening as well. And then I think I basically reiterated, though every report of bullying or discrimination needs to be investigated and resolved, not every incident is reportable as a DASA event. So simply paraphrasing in that while things are reported, whether we make the determination whether it is to be founded or not, it's still nonetheless investigated. And then for documentation purposes, that's just the final conclusion or the difference or distinction. And I won't read through the entire quotes, but I think it's important.
Can I just interject
Oh
one
yes,
thing there?
absolutely, please.
One thing I want to tell you is he's absolutely right that not every incident is going to be a violation of DASA. That doesn't mean that the school doesn't do something about it. You know what I mean? Like it may not arise to bullying, but it may be conduct that the school takes care of anyway. And that happens all the time. You know, it might be just somebody being shunned at a lunch table. That's not really bullying. But you want to teach them that might not be the nice way to treat people. You know, so my point is just that just because we find it's not DASA doesn't mean we say, oh, okay, then we're all done. You know, there are things the school does.
Thank you, appreciate that. And then just going back to that first point too, of just while the term with regard to bullying is used is quite ubiquitous in a lot of ways, really making sure that as we go through the definition, it can be distinguished, and it can be a single severe event, it can be a number of situations, but again, when it is deemed as bullying, I mean, that's up to us as school officials in partnership with Ms. Diego, of course, partnership with teachers, staff, what have you, to make those distinctions and decisions. But to Chris's point, these are still looked into with the same level of scrutiny and just, respect for the kids, of course.
So not every incident is bullying, right? Not every incident is material.
Yes.
Right, from that point. And then some bullying is not material enough to rise to DASA.
Right.
But it's nonetheless important and might get you a consequence in relationship to code of conduct or what have you.
Exactly.
I tell you, in my experience, more often than not, it's not a DASA violation. It doesn't arise to that level. More often, a lot of the complaints that are filed, again, doesn't mean that we don't do something about it. And when I do these trainings, I train a lot of coordinators and things, and I say, the one thing you have to do is do something. Don't ever doing nothing is never an option. Got to do so, even if it's just a conversation because somebody feels badly. You know, I mean, it's never an option to do nothing.
Okay.
Chris, can you tell us about something since this law was passed 9 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the enforcement history of it. What the kind of key cases have been, or whether there's been any kind of
I mean, you've got the
controversy over it?
extreme ones, of course, where there, actually it was somewhere down here, this area, where there was ongoing harassment based on religion. It was a child being harassed due to religion. In the school, wasn't one of our districts, thank God, but ignored it. And the kid finally hurt himself. He did not kill himself, but he hurt himself. And the school district was seriously sued because they did nothing. And that's why I come to that conclusion that it's never right to do nothing. You know, it's not there's no boys will be boys defense. There's no, that kind of thing. Just ignore it.
And what happened?
In that case, well, the school got pretty,
Paid out.
yeah, paid out a lot of money. Yeah, so those are the extremes. The more common ones are, one-on-one, either female, male, somebody not getting along. more common ones are the fights or just being mean. A lot of it's being mean, and it arises, but when it's persistent and becomes a series of related events, it can become.
Final question, do you think it's made a difference?
I think it's made a difference in the way we educate kids. Civility and all that is part of the curriculum. Not that it wasn't before, but it's more of a affirmative and aggressive kind of part of the curriculum now. So I think kids are more aware of it. I think kids get it more even than adults, to be quite honest. I think kids get what harassment really is, whereas just because somebody doesn't like you doesn't mean that's harassment. But parents think that a lot. So I think that it has made a difference in the kids understanding it and recognizing it and reporting.
All right. I think this is actually a perfect juncture because it was going to be at this time, so thank you, David. So at this time I was going to pass the baton over to Chris.
Okay. And what you have here is way more than we're going to really go through today, only because this is a training I use when I'm training the coordinators and what to do in the school. So a lot more detail than you as a board need, but we'll go through it anyway. And let me see what's the best way to do this. I don't want to have my back to you. Okay. All right. So what led up to this? These are the students that ended up committing suicide over bullying, and that's kind of what brought it to everyone's attention that this is serious. This is something that's a problem. We can't ignore it any longer. Okay, so a lot of this Alex went over already. It was signed into law in 2010, became effective in 2012. It amended the education law. It amended, our curriculum. It requires proactive and remedial measures. And then in July of 2013, it was amended again to include cyberbullying. I don't think I need this. I think I can read all this now. So it's the policy of the state of New York that you want an environment free of discrimination and harassment. The funny thing is, not funny, but before this law, it's not like we said, oh yeah, bullying's okay. It's not like that. What this did was it required a more affirmative action. It required the education, and it brought it to the attention of everybody. Again, it wasn't before this law, like you said, okay, it was okay to bully kids. We recognized it even before, but now it's just become more codified. These are all of the bases for discrimination. Bullying is really just a form of discrimination, and it can be based on all of these things: race, color, weight, national origin, blah, blah, blah. You see them all right there. Alex went over them all. And it can be either by employees or students. It's not just student to student. It can be an employee can be a bully.
This is enforced through civil rights?
Or enforced locally.
Right, but when you're using the term discrimination, you're using it legally?
Yes, but
So
DASA doesn't have its own cause of action.
Okay.
Right now, the Division of Human Rights, the Human Rights Law has been expanded. We don't know if that's going to bring some of this in. No, it was just expanded, so there's no precedent for it yet. No, this is all local. Okay, so you have to develop policies and provide students and parents with information and publicize and disseminate information and make it available in other languages when necessary. The Dignity Act coordinator that Alex referred to, he is one, and Ms. Diego. It's got to be at least one in every school building. If you had multiple buildings, you'd have to have one in each. They're appointed by the board, employed by the district. They're trained not only in recognizing and investigating, but also what you do about it, in the mitigation of it and the remediation after you determine, if you determine that bullying has occurred. So then in 2013 came cyberbullying. And this is probably the worst part of the whole, trying to deal with this, because as you know, everybody has one of these in their hand, all the kids have them, and in some respects, what happens on Saturday night at home or at the, in the park or wherever becomes your problem, whereas it wasn't before. And I'm not saying, again, you ignored it before either, but it wasn't your responsibility. Now, if that is occurring, even outside of school, if there is a nexus or causes a disruption in the school, it becomes your responsibility to make determinations and to act on it. So it really increased the responsibility of school districts. These are the requirements. Staff are mandated reporters. They have to report incidents of harassment, bullying, discrimination. Oral report within 1 day, written report within 2 days. That's part of the law. This is character education. I was telling you how that's been an increase. There's been an increase in what you have to do for your kids. So right now, character education is required. It includes instruction in civility, citizenship, character education, honesty, tolerance, personal responsibility, all of those things, which I think is probably the most positive thing that came out of this law, teaching kids that, that this is how you treat people. And again, it's not that you didn't do that before, but now it's kind of, there's part of the curriculum and there's more resources for it. And tolerance and respect for others. It's just something that every school should be teaching anyway. And they have to teach responsible use of the internet and electronic communications. That's probably the biggest problem we see, not just in DASA violations, but just in general. Kids on the internet, kids doing things on their phones and online. So definitions, Alex went over some of these with you. Harassment and bullying is creating a hostile environment by conduct or threats, intimidation, or abuse. And the key to all this is how the individual feels. So it's unreasonably and substantially interferes with that student's performance. So I may be offended or feel like I'm being bullied. Alex may not. Sue may not. But it doesn't matter. You can't look at me and say, well, that's not, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. If I feel that way, you have to take that seriously. So it's all very subjective. If it would cause any kind of emotional or physical harm, that's key pieces to it also. It includes things on school property, on the school bus, at school functions, and now off school property, again under the cyberbullying, or even non-cyberbullying if it creates a threat of substantial disruption in the school. So if somebody's threatening someone on Saturday night that says, I'm going to come into school and I'm going to beat you up, now that can become your problem because there's the nexus back to school. It's going to happen at school. We've even had cases where it starts at school and it wanders off and then there's a fight across the street at the local, convenience store or whatever. That in and of itself can be part of your investigation. Even though it had nothing to do with school property and occurred off school because it started on school property, we conducted our investigation and through a DASA and found a violation. Cyberbullying is really just bullying through any form of electronic communication. Same thing as saying it or writing it on a piece of paper. Cyberbullying, there's a whole host of things, and these are just some examples. Spreading lies, posting pictures, pretending to be someone else, being the person you're trying to bully, sending threatening emails, texts, making threatening or offensive posts. The problem with cyberbullying is it's easy for people to hide behind these. It's very easy for kids. They tend to say and do more behind a screen than they would face to face. Discrimination is just an act of denying rights, benefits, anything available to others based on a particular class, and all of those protected classes that we saw earlier, race.
I'm sorry, but
That's okay.
in terms of the definitions, but the cyberbullying, it can be anything that makes the child feel hurt or scared and is impacting their performance in school, right?
Correct.
But it doesn't necessarily have to relate to a protected class. Like, they don't have to be attacking them because of the protected class.
Well, it's been expanded. Originally it was. The law was not intended to be as broad as it was, I don't think. If you look at the legislative history and why they did it, it was supposed to be based on protected classes. It's been expanded. I mean, even the classes have expanded. So no, and again, that goes back to, you don't ignore it just because you can't click off one of those, categories. There's always going to be something. It could be, because I'm a female, I'm a male, I'm a certain religion. You could always bring it back to something, but you don't have to key in, and I would never say, if you can't find one of those, ignore it. Yes, I agree. It's just, to me, it comes back to, are these kids feeling like they can't come to school and get a, discrimination-free or harassment-free education? Sites, again, school property, parking lots, school buses, school-sponsored events off campus, if it's a sporting event or a field trip, same thing. Off-school property, when the conduct creates a foreseeable risk of substantial disruption back at school. There's still got to be a nexus back to school. If it's with one of your students, but the other person is not your student, that's not going to come back to your school. Policy requirements, these are just something that is part of your DASA policy. I believe it's yours, I've seen yours, it complies with all of these. More. The biggest part of this is preventing and prohibiting retaliation for a legitimate complaint. So what you have to do is, at the end of every process we do, we remind everyone that's been involved is that there can be no retaliation. You can't take it out against either the harasser or the harassee because they made a complaint. And that's one piece that I think people miss a lot, that the kids go back at each other. We have to remind kids all the time, you cannot take it out. So Beth makes a complaint against me and it's unfounded. I can't then go back and, retaliate against her for doing that. And neither can my friends. That's what happens a lot. We have to remind them that they have to have their friends make sure that they're not going back after Beth because she made that complaint. So that's a big piece of this. Sometimes we have to notify local law enforcement. It depends. Some of them are easy, obviously, if it was somebody got beat up or sexually harassed or abused, those are easy. The other ones are a little less. To me, I would always err on the side of caution and report to the police. They may say, we're not taking it, not a crime. Let them make that decision. Okay, so reporting and investigation. See, this is where it's going to get into a lot of detail that we'll go through pretty quickly because this is how we train the coordinators. The reporting form, everybody should have a form that includes all of these pieces. We have sample forms, as does the State Education Department. I think the best thing you can do for your staff is to train and have them recognize what bullying is. Unwanted and aggressive behavior and imbalance of power. That's really the one that's hard to see. Everybody can see the kid that pushes somebody on the playground or takes their lunch money, and it's the person who is much more passive aggressive, but there's an imbalance of power and they use that. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're just more aggressive. Those are the ones that are harder to recognize and that you really want to train your staff to see.
Just
We'll go over some of that.
Do the students get trained as well on recognizing?
Part of
Recognizing.
bullying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things too, is that it's embedded within a lot of since we've had the district priority of social emotional learning. So a lot of those, they're tangentially related to all this, where you're talking about positive behavior, behavioral intervention support and reinforcing positive behaviors, civility, citizenship, that's part of our work with Yale Ruler, or dialectical behavior therapy. A lot of these things that we've pulled together are also, whether they're preemptive acts to try and help and teach our kids, along with our school counselors, school psychologists are constantly going into classes, if not once, approximately every week for some grades, in addition to what we provide in 7th and 8th grade. But on an informal basis, there's a lot of times where kids seek them out to just have conversations along with our teachers too. So there's a lot of layers to be proactive, but then also some of those steps are also in response to. So when we talk about, we go through an investigation of whether or not it's found or not, I think to Chris's point, we're still going through those same steps. We're still talking to those kids and respecting how they felt, and then a lot of those steps, it may not be a formal consequence of what we've determined as a detention or suspension. I mean, some of those things are more restorative and with the counseling piece as well. So I think that's also an important note that we've really been conscious of, to really have layers in there too.
Yeah, the restorative pieces. I'm not an educator, but I'm very impressed with how those things come about and what good they do. Because you can punish a kid, that's fine. You can punish them, but to teach them that why it's not right and how to deal with it is so much more valuable than punishment. And those restorative practices are pretty impressive, I think. You know, you get the kids together. They have to agree to it, but you get them together, they talk. I was impressed with the last one I saw, so.
And can I just ask, just so to clarify, we do teach our students about the positive types of behavior, and we do deal with restorative practices, but do we also train students to be able to recognize bullying by actually demonstrating what bullying is to them so that they can see it on the school playground, on the school bus? Or is it more just about the modeling positive behavior?
It's really, I wouldn't say in a formal, and what I'm thinking of as you're talking, I taught in the elementary setting, and we used to have, there were programs such as Second Step, for example, which some schools use, which essentially is a script where, at that time, where students would kind of role play or act out these scenarios, and then we kind of facilitated dialogue. We do not use that, but I think in a lot of ways that was almost overly formalized or overly structured, but I think our teachers and ourselves, that we're constantly having those, it's as it happens, or getting ahead of, or taking those opportunities as teachable moments. But I think, you know, to your question in terms of a formalized, kind of explicit, this is what it looks like, and this is, I don't want to say that happens every day or with this frequency, but it is, of course. I mean, that's, every day is it's such an important part of our school, so.
Thanks.
No, thanks.
So these are the different types of bullying that we're training people to recognize. Probably one of the most difficult ones is the social bullying. Obviously physical bullying is easy to recognize, verbal bullying, you know, if somebody's calling people names, you can hear it. It's the leaving people out. Those are the ones that are more difficult to recognize. And it's also difficult to explain sometimes that sometimes, you know, you can't mandate or dictate that people be friends, that kids be friends with each other. You can't, Garrison doesn't require that, you can't do that. So it's difficult sometimes with smaller kids, especially younger kids, to say that, you know, if somebody doesn't want to be friends with your child, that isn't necessarily bullying. So those are the more difficult ones, the social bullying, I think, to deal with. These are warning signs that we train people to look for, you know, getting into fights, you know, bullying, or gang activity, increasingly aggressive, frequent visits to the principal, unexplained extra money or belongings. That could mean that they're taking things from people, blames others for problems, doesn't accept responsibility, and they're worried about their reputation, although they bully to protect it, is how it works. More common, you could see the bullied child. Oh, sorry.
I was wondering if there's any data or research about where most bullying occurs or when during the day.
I don't know. There may be, but I don't think that would be more on the education side. We could look at that. The legal side doesn't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But there probably is.
I would, from a very informal,
Sure.
anecdotal place,
Yeah.
I think that it would be fairly safe to say that in the less structured times of the day,
Yeah.
so whether that was, I'm addressing a lot of things during lunch recess.
On the school bus.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I
what
can
would
say
guess.
that's probably the
Yes.
place we get the most complaints, whether they're valid or not, or, you know, whether they are actual violations or not, but that's definitely one of the worst places, and not just for bullying, for everything.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and not just here, it's everywhere.
Timeless phenomenon.
Yeah, it is, yeah, big fact. So part of the training is also is recognizing it in the child who's being bullied, because they're not always willing or feel like they can come forward. As much as you tell them there are people there to listen to them, kids are reluctant to come forward. They don't want to be seen as a tattler. They don't want to be seen as, you know, a crybaby. So they're very reluctant often to come forward. These are the kind of things we look for that aren't verbal. You know, unexplained injuries, that's more kind of easy, but lost things, like all of a sudden they're losing everything. They don't feel well, their attendance drops, they change their eating habits, displaying destructive behaviors. Declining grades, loss of friends, feeling helpless. When we do trainings a lot, we train people that some of the most key people in your district are your bus drivers and your aides, and people that see these kids on a daily basis and know that when usually, you know, Chris gets on the bus and she says hi every morning, and then all of a sudden I'm getting on the bus and my hoodie's up and I'm looking down and not. those are signs, those are keys, something's going on. And it doesn't mean they're being bullied, it could be something happening at home, it could be just something sad in their life, but those are the things we train people to look at. It may be nothing, but don't ignore it. Again, it goes back to don't do nothing. Report it. If it's nothing, that's great. Maybe they were just having a bad day, a bad week, maybe, grandmother's sick or mom is sick. But those are the kind of things we see that show that are bullying. Grades start to drop, all of a sudden they don't want to come to school, Those are really the things you see in a bully, more than them coming forward and telling you that.
I think just going back, Bethany, to your question too, the most common times during the school day that this may be taking place, I think it's also important to note, as we all know, and Chris has referred to as well, that in this day and age that we're faced with many more circumstances that either have a nexus to or the origin is outside of school with regards to social media, and then it manifests itself in something else. So I think all the more reason, it leads us to a good place where all the more important time to have, collaboration between parents, community members, staff as well, and a lot of the reasons too why a few weeks ago we had the internet safety presentation for our students and then offered it to our parents. I think going forward we'd love to have, much more parents and community involvement, because we do think it is, it's our kids' world. And the questions they had, again, which I referred to a few weeks ago, were absolutely, a gentleman who walked away who said they were articulate and just unbelievably thoughtful about what they were asking. So I just thought that was worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, thanks.
The kids recognize it, they know what's going on. Because what happens when a report is made, you take it again, never ignore it, always take them seriously. Look for immediate things, and if there's a safety issue, of course, we're going to keep the child safe immediately. The trickier parts are especially in a small school like you have. You might have one class, so you don't have the option of separating them. You don't have the option. You'll hear that all the time. I don't want him in my daughter's class, or I don't want her in my daughter's class, or my son's class. You don't always have that option. And the worst thing you can do is move the person who's been harassed. Never do that, unless they ask for it. And oftentimes, you're trying to separate. We can move. Sometimes you can move kids out of a class, move them to a different lunch, move them to a different table, do something. Not always. Sometimes you just have to deal with it within the structure of a same classroom or cafeteria. But always do something. Develop plans. One of the keys too is always, even after everything's done, so you've done your investigation, you've determined it's bullying, or even not, or determined it's not bullying. You have your restorative practices, you go through whatever punishments you have. One of the keys is always follow up. 2 weeks, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, just going back to the person who felt bullied or harassed and saying, is everything okay? And making sure they know they have somebody to go to. The follow-up piece is really key, because sometimes you think, okay, it's done, it's over. But it's not, it comes back, and you want to be sure that that student knows that we haven't forgotten about you just because that incident might be over.
And that would be an instance too where there, again, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a consequence or a disciplinary measure, but that
No.
An actionable response to something, whether it was founded or not, oftentimes is to kind of formalize and set scheduled check-ins with those students who are involved, as well as there, oftentimes it may not just be two, if it's 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm part of those conversations. Sometimes it's we gauge the group of students and who should be at the table, but
You have the stay away plans and things. And one of the, we've done things like, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable being in the hallway, okay, we let that person leave a minute early, or let that student stay back for a minute. And everybody knows they can be early or late for a class. You address the individual.
Well, Chris, I want to go on record that I'm absolutely in favor of people being nice to each other, kids especially. But this seems to have grown like kudzu a little bit. I mean, it starts life as a piece of legislation designed to protect certain classes of people, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like it's grown, and it's become almost. Okay, we should be nice to each other. You're not nice to me, I'm gonna accuse you of bullying me or something. It just seems like it's gone way overboard in terms of its original purpose.
And it has. You're absolutely right. But it's what we have to deal with. Yep. It's not just based on those. They
Well,
say
when you
it's
say
still
we
based
have
on.
to deal with, what do we tell our administrators? I mean, is this an act to protect designated categories of people, or whatever the term
Not
is?
necessarily, it's to protect your students from
So it's
feeling
really
like they feel
nothing
harassed
to do with
and bullied.
discrimination, with categories of discrimination.
Well, often it does. Oh, 9 times out of 10 it does. It's you know, it does most of the time. But I wouldn't, the point is, you know, just because you can't, again, check off one of those boxes, we don't ignore it. If the student's feeling like they are being harassed, even if it's not a basis of one of those protected classes, you're gonna react and you're going to resolve it. And again, that happened before this law. Remember, forget the law. If I came forward and said this kid's picking on me, you were going to do something about it. Doesn't matter why. So that I think this is kind of codified things, and it has given us like a pathway. But this isn't really new. Bullying was around before 2010, and you addressed it before 2010. So I think it's just given us kind of a way to address it more formally, and a requirement to address it.
Do the numbers reported to the state help the state in some way in terms of future legislation? Are they using that information?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, again, it's just within New York State, so
Yeah.
it's not, the feds aren't looking at it. Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of. I think they're just collecting data.
Do other states have similar?
I believe so. I think they do. I don't know. I can't tell you where, but I think some of it was modeled after others. Yeah, I think they're called the same thing, but it's the same kind of idea of protecting kids.
And to go back just quickly what you were saying before in terms of the follow-up after a report is done, is the so now we're getting very specific. Is the follow-up done in our school by Alex and Krista, or is it, let's say a student reported it to their teacher, then the teacher came to the coordinators?
Well, it always
Wondering
goes
what
through
the
the
pathways-
coordinators. The
Is it always
teachers,
the two of you who would do that follow-up piece? Or would
well,
you?
the teachers might be involved.
Right,
Okay.
we would go through, if the, once the report is made, it goes to the two of us, we go through our investigation, but that is oftentimes, in the aftermath, I think it's most powerful, it's not always Ms. Diego and I formally sitting down with, the target and or aggressor, that it's often involving. And our staff, as Chris said, they play an active role too, that is, if it's identified, it's very collaborative in the sense that a lot of those steps, because a lot of these things are happening between students within their classroom or within the hallways or when they're interacting with them much more frequently. So they absolutely are involved. I mean, teachers, teacher aides are often, we bring people to the table that will be of help and support, so that it's also seen too that kids have connections throughout the day. They may not see me very frequently,
Right.
but it's important. So all the more reason they have that comfort, that rapport, and they do, and they have that access to many different staff members who they could then go to. So.
And you give them the option of who are you comfortable with. If they're really close to a teacher and they, great, then go talk to that person or tell them if there's an issue. You want them to be, it might not be Alex who's the principal and, maybe you don't see you all the time, and it's going to be somebody they see on a daily basis. But all the teachers are involved, the teacher aides. Again, I went back to those are the people that see it. Those are the people that are going to recognize it on the playground and in the hallways and on the school bus. So those are the people you want involved.
And I apologize if I'm getting ahead, are parents communicated with?
Oh, absolutely.
For if there's something's reported internally, it's not coming from a parent saying, hey, this happened at school to my kid, but if it goes to
The
this level.
parent of who?
Let's say a child who's been bullied goes to their teacher, goes to the guidance
Yes.
counselor.
Parents
Then-
are notified.
And that's again outside of Dash and I, that if there's
Yeah.
some kind of incident or some kind of discord between students, then one of us is often reaching out to the parents and of course respecting confidentiality, but letting them know that oftentimes it may be just to let you know this came to my attention. We're starting or we're in the process of looking into it. May I speak to Johnny? Take those steps, and then of course once we have additional information, then follow up with the parents. But that's another powerful piece too, because whether or not it's happening in school, that we have to make sure we're communicating that clearly and to continue that partnership so that those conversations are happening not only in school but at home too.
But one of the difficult parts is, it's the parent makes the complaint, my kid's being harassed or bullied, and the school finds it is. They want to know exactly what's going to happen to that other kid, and we can't tell them. We can't, so that's frustrating sometimes for the parent. I want to know what's going on. We can tell them we're taking appropriate actions. I mean, obviously they can see if a student's been suspended or not, but they might not see the other things that are going on behind the scenes, and we can't tell them all the time. It's a FERPA violation. So that can be a little frustrating for parents and difficult to navigate a little bit for your staff, because parents get angry. I want to know, or I want that kid suspended. I want him out, and it's not always an option. So these are kind of what happens when it's investigated. You address the student safety issue first. If there's a safety issue, that's something that's addressed immediately. Identify the behavior that you want it to stop, and you want it to stop as soon as possible. And you want to clarify what the expectation is. It's not just you have to stop doing that, but it's just teaching them, okay, what do we expect of you? No retaliation, that's a big piece of it. Get all sides of the story. I mean, we interview kids, anybody that was in the area that might have seen something. I don't know how many cameras and things you have. We review camera, we review video. It's a thorough investigation that's done to make sure. Some of it's obvious. Some of it, I just went through one where the kid walked up and slapped the girl right on the head, right on camera. I mean, couldn't have been clearer. And this had happened a couple times in the past few years, so she finally reported it, and because of the series, she felt like this kid was targeting her. And again, go back to, there was really no protected class there, but we did an ADASA investigation, found it was a ADASA violation, and did the restorative. That's where I just saw the whole restorative process. And it was that one was easy because it was right there on the video. Either parent could deny it. Parents couldn't deny it. We didn't really need to talk to kids much. We talked to them to see, because there's no audio, just to see if anything was said, threatening or not. But other than that, those are the easy ones if you have them on video. But otherwise, you would go through and you would talk to a lot of people. And you document your investigation and your findings, and you identify whether it is a material incident or if it's not. And again, not every complaint is a DASA violation. Doesn't mean you don't do anything about it, but it's not a DASA violation. The social media era this is probably the worst part for us.
So before we move off of the investigation, it sounded like this is a very lengthy process. Is it when you get
It depends on the circumstance.
And you're talking, I know, in our district, are you generally involved, or as counsel, or is that like a second step?
It depends.
Is usually Alex and Krista doing it first, getting through the
I would say for the most part that Mr. Diego and I are able to, and then of course if there's something that we try to file that ladder of referral. So if there's something that I'm not quite sure of, I err on the side of caution. I have a conversation with Laura, and then I would say oftentimes we're able to deal with it internally, but we also don't hesitate to reach out to that's why we have our legal representation, but it's fairly infrequent, I would say, for our purposes.
Yeah, it depends on the case. We're not involved in every one, but it depends on how bad it is, I guess. So anyway, this is all the different things regarding social media. Electronic communication has just changed everything. It just has. And what we see mostly is kids will say anything behind that screen. And once they come out behind it, that's when I think the real learning happens, when they realize that you're really affecting this person face to face. That's part of the restorative piece. When they can look at the person and say, you hurt my feelings, and this hurt my feelings. Even if, again, it wasn't a DASA violation, you made me feel bad. Kids respond to that. Most kids respond to that. They think it's real easy to say those things on a screen, but it's not easy to say it face to face. So bringing it out of that is a real key to this, to making it, to fixing it and making it go away in the future.
And just another aspect with regards to social media, a lot of our, something that we see too is that our kids are of course very savvy and have the group chats, and they figure out, well, who's in charge of the chat, so you have this element of who am I going to remove from this chat, and again it's removed, they're behind the screen, so a lot of our conversations become, well, let's bring it to kind of a tangible physical example where if you were playing a game or if you were on the basketball court, that's essentially you saying you can be in a group, but no, you cannot play. A lot of our kids have difficulty because it's for them it's two separate worlds, and it's interesting.
Right.
It is. This has created the biggest problem for us in all our school districts, the social media and the electronic communications. These are things we hear all the time. I didn't do it. I didn't mean to hurt anybody. And that's part of the education of it, I think. That's part of educating kids that these things do hurt. These things do matter. I don't know if you've had it before. We have a lot of times, you have kids videotaping everything that's going on too. So you have the fight that occurs that you might not see. It's in a bathroom, whatever. You've got somebody in there videotaping. Recording the fights before they're over. Mockumentaries, that's been a new thing where they're mocking other kids online. Some of the problem is too is that, and I don't do this stuff so I don't know, but like these things disappear, like they're there and then they go away, so we can't go back and find them. Kids though are screenshotting them. Kids are savvy. Somebody asked earlier, what do kids know? They know it. They know when it's happening, and if they can catch it, they will report it. Most of our reports come from other students, not from parents. Find that interesting. Best reporting. This is more training for people like Alex. You want to make sure you interview everybody, reinforce that retaliation is prohibited. You provide notice. You educate even the witnesses what's happening. This is what's happening here. We need to investigate this because Laura feels badly about this. Kids cooperate. Kids are very cooperative. This is just what a material incident is. It creates a hostile environment, which is severe and pervasive. And it can be one time, or it can be, like I said, over periods of time. It can be little things that add up to the point where kids just can't take it anymore. Students with disabilities is a whole nother area. It can lead to tuition reimbursement if they feel like they can't get their education here. So we don't. It's not like we treat it any differently, but there are other concepts within kids that students with disabilities that we need to address. So what happens at the end? This is the tricky part. We provide notice of the outcome to both parties. Unfortunately, sometimes parents want more than they can get, but we do give them as much as we can. We want to notify the parties the right to appeal. We take prompt action. That's the one key, is that don't let a lot of time go by. And there's going to be time, because it's going to take time to investigate and come to your conclusion, but it should never be 30 days later you're still looking into it. There's got to be a conclusion at some point. And then monitor and support after. And that's a real key piece. But make sure they know you're still there. You haven't abandoned them, even though that incident might be over. Best practices, make sure everybody knows who the DASA coordinators are. Make sure they know that there is, make sure the DASA coordinators review all the incidents, document, and report. And this is more for mandatory reporting. You all have to report to state ed. I won't go through all that. So how do you, this is more for Alex, but how do you promote a positive school environment? You teach it, you model it. Sure you do that here already. This is something you would bring to your classrooms. Reporting is not tattling. That's a big thing. Kids don't report it because they feel like they're tattling, and that they have to put up with it. This is how you teach kids. Teasing is not allowed. Gossip and rumors are not okay. Promote a welcoming environment. These are all things that your teachers are being trained in. More positive school. Alex, you probably have a lot of programs that promote positive school climate. School personnel, and this is more, you don't really need to do this. What does the school do? Foster the environment, train your employees, staff, bring it to the kids' attention. Be proactive. That's the best thing that we can teach people, and we're training people. Stop it in their tracks. Don't ignore it. Get parents involved, get the community involved. It takes a village, as they say. Everybody should be involved in this and to be able to recognize it and report it. De-escalating, this is a big part of it too. And then maybe, Alex, I don't know if you've ever had this, kids they can feed on each other. So you want to de-escalate things as soon as possible, because what we've seen is one incident can lead to a second incident, can lead to a third incident if you don't try to calm things down as soon as possible. So that's something that your staff does on a regular basis. I'm sure just the kids not getting along within the classroom. But be respectful of what they're telling you. That's the other thing. Just be respectful. Make sure you're listening and that you're taking it seriously. De-escalating student behavior. This is more for any issues on the school bus. This is probably the worst place that we see things. And you know, I don't know how many buses you have, how many bus drivers, and if you have aides on the buses. But if you have aides on your buses, please be sure that they're not sitting in the front talking to the bus driver, that they're in the back of the bus and they're looking forward. So many times things happen right behind the adults that are on the bus. Can't tell you how many times that happens. Internet awareness, you know, save everything, but this is one more for your staff, but you know, if you get information about something that's improper, don't save it to your phone, don't save it to your laptop, don't save it to your computer. We had an unfortunate principal that he was informed of, it was sexting, you know, kids taking naked pictures of each other and or themselves and sending it out. Well, came to the attention of a principal, and he thought he was doing the right thing and downloaded it on his computer so he could save it. He was then charged with having child pornography on his computer, so never download those things. And that. Report it to the authorities. The cafeteria is another place that's a very common place. You asked where this occurs a lot. In the cafeteria, in the halls. Classrooms are probably the places that are most structured and that teachers can most see it. Progressive discipline, this is addressing it, you know, making sure that it's age appropriate, measured and balanced. And you got to consider what the offense was. You know, the kid who beat someone up, is you're going to treat that differently than the kid who is just ignoring someone at the lunch table. Those are two different things, and you have to address student behavior differently. Use remedial supports, counseling, service learning, restitution, all those kind of things. Meeting with parents, include the parents to make sure they know what's going on, parents of both sides. And consider whether there's a larger issue. In one of our schools, it kind of came to the school's attention after a couple of these that there was a problem in the 6th grade. For some reason, there was a problem in a certain grade, and they really needed to address, they had assemblies for that grade, and so you kind of have to look at where is this occurring and why is it occurring there, and it seems to snowball sometimes. So we just had that happen, and it was just one grade, and they really concentrated on that grade. We don't know why, but it worked, though, after they did train, and they had a lot of assemblies for those kids, and it seems to have gotten better.
I think just to jump in, one of the challenge, I wouldn't say challenge, but I think maybe it might be an opportunity as well, is when we're looking at, I've discovered in a time here that there's quite a wide spectrum in terms of the expectations with regards to discipline, whatever we may call it, you know, consequences, so on and so forth. So I've spoken, and every parent who I will speak with, some are adamant about the more traditional forms of discipline that we grew up with, whether it's a detention or a suspension, and some of us are on the other end of the spectrum as well, thinking of the more restorative practices, how we're being preemptive, counseling kids through things, giving them those coping strategies and walking them through that. So I think that is something that it truly is, and I think this is how it should be, a case-by-case basis in terms of the conversations that we have with the kids as well as with the parents. But it is challenging in terms of making sure that everyone feels like, and not everyone always doesn't feel like whether it's justice has been served or they know enough about how this has been responded to. It is an incredibly frustrating process in that aspect for myself, not being able to do so, but as I share with parents that, you know, I have a responsibility to protect the confidentiality of, you know, staff and of course for students.
Yeah, and a lot of districts are going away from the traditional suspension because they're not finding that that's not working. So now you got a kid who's cyberbullying. Now you're sending them home. Well, guess what? He's got all kinds of time to sit home and do more. It's more of. I think what we're coming to, how things are kind of shifting is we're trying to educate. and teach kids why this isn't right, rather than punish them. And punishment is also part of it too, because they have to understand there's a consequence, but that's not going to stop it. It's educating them on it more than punishing them.
And I'm glad that Chris made that point, because in a lot of instances, again, a more traditional approach of we're going to remove said student from school, a lot of our approaches in specific instances, and I completely agree with it, is in terms of the value from an educational standpoint, as well as just for the sake of that child, in sending them out versus having them here and taking time to reflect, to have, so that they don't fall behind the work, but they're still getting that support from us. So I think that that's something that varies district by district in terms of an approach or overall kind of pedagogy or culture, but that is very much the approach here too, which I think is a good one.
I think it's more effective from what I've seen. I'm not an educator, but just from what I've seen.
Chris, are you hanging out for a little bit, or should we field questions now, or?
Well,
How much, because you might want to interject while Alex is talking.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So, and as I mentioned, Ms. Diego is the other DAS coordinator. There was some mention in terms of trainings, what have you. So she and I will go at least once a year to make sure that we're completely, abreast of anything that has been updated. Last year, as we were entering the district, gave us an opportunity to look at our incident form, which I have in a few slides that's available on the website as well, to make sure that that was streamlined and coherently communicated and available. So those were all opportunities, and she also did take the time, so thank you to Ms. Diego, to kind of structure a flow chart, so to speak. I do think it is important to note, as I've said before, that removing the word DASA, that this is a process in terms of whether it fits these 4 bullet points, or while it is a case by case, it really is a matter of if it's affecting students and their perception is what we have to make sure we address. We're going to go through those steps, and the only difference here is whether whatever number, what is done with that number is, I do not know, but that's what's being reported to the state. But this is kind of a little bit of a
Consequence or a punishment or whatever
Well,
it
it
is.
may not be a punishment, but it may be a teaching. We're may not punish them for it, but look, Alex, you made Chris feel bad. Isn't that something we should address? Isn't that something we should educate? Even though whether you did it or not, she feels like you did. She feels like she's being targeted. Those are the kind of things that there's a lot of times you can't come to a conclusion, unfortunately.
And that's actually, to Chris's point, that's often a challenge in a lot of our conversations. Will be in terms of, in most instances, there's a number of other students present, but I really try to be as aware, because I understand, of course, the more witnesses and students you talk to, then the bigger something becomes. Honestly, with a lot of our kids, it really becomes, I really don't have to go to that point very often, where I have to really dig too much, whether it's kind of an open admittance, but oftentimes there is not a hard, tangible photograph or video clip or what have you, so it really does become even more so in trusting our kids. And in terms of whether there would be a consequence or not, it's a number of variables in terms of, have I spoken with that student about some similar situations and saying, well, predictable patterns, so on and so forth. That's really a judgment that I can't make a blanket statement of, but it's that is.
As with most kinds of harassment, a lot of times it's a he said, she said. Most harassers know that they're not supposed to be doing it, so they don't do it in public. They don't do it in front of a lot of people. So, so it's very difficult often to come to a conclusion. And a lot of times you have to go on credibility, and you come to a conclusion whether you can decide it happened or didn't happen, or maybe you can't decide either of those, but you're still going to do something.
Yeah, so the problem that I have with this, and it really does sort of bother me, is that this piece of legislation came about because there was documented evidence that discrimination was happening against people because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, and it has now been extended to cover essentially boorish behavior, which presumably should have been addressed before the piece of legislation going back to the 19th century, right? Boorish behavior. And the problem with that is that the value of having a piece of legislation that is addressed at preventing discrimination based on protected categories is lost. It's weakened. It's vitiated. because now it's everything. And I think that's a loss. Now, I don't know how that affects the way that administrators in a school like this think about this, but I think it's important for kids to have the understanding that there's a history of racial, religious discrimination based on sexual orientation, and that is unacceptable. That is, there's also a whole other category of boorish behavior. But the fact that these have been melded together it seems like the laws. I mean, something's been lost.
Well, I disagree. I don't think anything cancels anything out. I don't think this doesn't cover all bullying acts. It only covers very specific ones.
Again, it goes back to.
And whether we like it or don't like it, we're obligated to understand how it plays within the district, and our obligations as a board to make sure that, to oversee them, make sure that everything is moving appropriately, and that the superintendent is empowered to do what they need to do in order to meet the needs of the act. I don't think inclusion of minor incidents erases the reality of major incidents. I don't think it does that. So we disagree.
The very first time.
So just, I had made reference, so this was something that we had the opportunity to look at and streamline into a page-and-a-half document. Again, noting, I think Chris had noted all this is available on the website as well, but bystanders, time and date, just very kind of essential things that we gathered from the investigation. Oftentimes, I know there were some questions about how long these things may take. Oftentimes this is, and Ms. Diego was very good about making sure that it's done a long way and that we complete everything. But often the investigation takes place, and then this is kind of the summative exercise to make sure that it was done. So I believe it's a priority to make sure that we act quickly, because the immediacy of having those conversations and determining what kind of response, that's really that's the most important aspect of it. Not necessarily whether it's found or not, that's important, but we need to have those conversations with kids quickly. So there are a series of quotes that, forgive me, I will read only because they are, and I know as much as many of us have poured through the handbook night after night after night, I say that in jest, I thought it was appropriate to just take a couple of excerpts, because some of the questions, to bring it back to the district of how are we taking this policy and this law and making it align with our practices that make sense for our purposes here in Garrison. The rules of conduct listed, and this is again from the middle school handbook, linked appropriately on page 25. The rules of conduct listed below are intended to reflect the expectations of the Board of Education and focus on safety and respect for the rights and property of others. Students who will not accept responsibility for their own behavior and who violate these school rules will be required to accept the consequences for their conduct. Engaging in, and you'll see some of the similar verbiage, which I thought was important that we have incorporated this into our documents, but it's not to say, last slide, that we'll talk about some implications for where we can always improve and do better. Engaging in harassing conduct, verbal threats, intimidation, or abuse that reasonably causes or would reasonably be expected to cause a student to fear for his or her physical well-being. Engage in any conduct that endangers the safety, morals, health, or welfare of others. Examples of such conduct include discrimination based upon a person's actual perceived race, age, sexual orientation, as we've gone over directly from the policy, which I need not read again. So, point being that we do have it within the language. I think to some of our questions, it's important to not only be in the verbiage, but in our implementation, in our practice, and that it makes sense and is fitting and is meaningful for us. So this again is from our handbook. The best discipline is self-imposed, and students must learn to assume and accept responsibility for their own behavior as well as the consequences of their misbehavior. District personnel who interact with students are expected to use appropriate disciplinary action only when necessary and to place emphasis on the student's ability to grow in self-discipline. Again, I think this is a nice dovetail to the idea and the importance of the partnership between home and school. And just that, of course, that we will take those steps and those appropriate and as needed steps, but I think that it's really, the empowerment is really in having the communication at home and then ensuring that we all have an understanding of what's taking place.
One of the things we've talked to students and their parents about is, look, this seems very harsh at the time, where you're being suspended or you lose going to the prom or whatever it is, the consequences. But we try to bring it back to, this is happening and yes, it's important right now in school, but if you were in a job or, you would be fired. If you were in college, you'd probably be thrown out. If you were, it's time to learn it now, and this consequence seems really, bad right now, but the best thing we could hope for is that it ends here, and it doesn't happen when you have that job, or you're in college, or you're in the military, or wherever you are, consequences are going to be a lot more serious than not going to the prom or not being able to play on the basketball team on Friday night. So that's part of that whole self-discipline, and it's a great quote, because they accept responsibility and understand that there are consequences. And although it might seem really harsh now, nothing compared to what would happen in the real world.
And this also allows, this is nice for myself as an administrator to support my having those conversations and on a case-by-case basis, determining. I'll often say to students and say, I'd like you to think about, is a consequence necessary, or what do you think would be a fair and justifiable consequence? And I'll often frame it, as long as I'm not speaking to a child who's too young, but most of the kids will then take that, ponder on it, and I frame it to the same way, and often it's a conversation that really this allows me to then determine, where and when and what that looks like at home. And that's important because then kids understand that we're not mutually exclusive, that we're working, together for the same goal and supporting those kids. All disciplinary measures resulting from prohibited behaviors are left to the discretion of any faculty member and or the principal in accordance with the code of conduct. So here we have the alignment of number of not only policy, but of course policy with our handbook as well. And again, courtesy of Lois Gordon, I think a lot of this was, Chris had included some slides in terms of what components should be included in reviewing our practices and protocols. I think there are many things that we are doing very well and effectively. I think we are doing them, regardless of whether this legislation was in place, I think that this place really does pride itself on making sure that our kids are academically and socially, emotionally supported. But we really do make sure that all of these things are being done with fidelity. I think the third from the bottom, where we look at informing staff as to procedures for responding to discrimination and harassment, we do that, but I think that's one of the points that there could be more opportunities with our kids, and there's also more opportunities that myself as a DASA coordinator could provide and facilitate with staff, just to continue to have those conversations, build awareness, build capacity, and so on. And again, this is just in a similar vein to what Chris had presented. So I just think it's nice to see it's similar language and approach as well. So whether it's the expertise of Chris, but it's really very consistent, which is good.
I have one question
Oh, yeah.
on the audit checklist. Do we keep the record? Are we required to keep the records for only the founded incidents,
I don't know what we're
any
required.
report? Because it says we keep the records until the youngest person of the incident reaches age 27. Is that for
All
just the
records.
found?
I think you would
Even
keep
if
all
it was
of them.
unfounded, you have to keep a record
Yeah.
of it.
Right, and I was going to say I don't know if we're required to, but we just err on the side of we're keeping it all. I mean, we go through the investigation, we just
Just
check
a lot.
whether founded, unfounded, we keep it. Yeah. Good question. So implications for future practice. So just some things that we think in terms of, you'll note in looking at the handbooks, I do think it's important that things are, of course, developmentally appropriate and framed in the appropriate way. But it might be worth considering looking at the handbooks while I do review them on an annual basis. I do think it's important to make sure you have representative stakeholders at the table to then make sure that the alignment makes sense and that it's consistent, whether it's K-5 or 6-8. Continue review and alignment of district policy and DASA. So this is, I had made reference to that, the changes with our own district policy, and then just making sure that is a difficult process in keeping everything aligned and up to date, but something to keep in mind as we go forward. Continue redundancy, or rather just the repetition of communication of the DASA coordinators and contact information. So just simply making sure that community staff, everyone knows who the point of contact is, myself as Diego, and are familiar with those protocols. And the last three kind of speak to perhaps additional ways that we can further our own learning and awareness. So continuing to update staff with appropriate trainings, whether it's facilitated by myself and turnkeyed within different meetings. Coordinating opportunities. We had spoken while we went to Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES to do so. it would also make sense to partner with our legal representation as well, since they're very familiar with our own district and specific practices. So that was a consideration. And then also just additional opportunities, importantly as well, to make sure that our parents, community members feel informed and understand the aspects of this. And it can be fairly complex, but in a lot of ways it can be simplified, because I think there's a lot out there that gives it a little bit more unnecessary complexity than it may warrant. So, questions? That was, oh, well,
Yeah.
and of course,
The circle.
we're all familiar with this, Jenna,
Circle.
but it's relevant in everything we do. So it really is, our kids feel most supported when everybody is, and so when I say stakeholders, that when we look at these, whether it's code of conduct, handbooks, that the more of us that are around the table and having these discussions and continuing to have these discussions. So I appreciate the opportunity to just at least initiate that and then look at ways that we can extend the conversation further.
So, one thing, I had asked some questions of Laura about this, because I reviewed this beforehand, and this is largely about student-to-student conduct, and so I asked about like faculty-to-student conduct, and I'm going to read a question I asked and how Laura...
Sent you responses.
I know you did,
Okay, okay.
but I think that it's important for the public and the rest of the
Sure.
board to hear this too.
Hold on for a minute, just
So-
for a second. Are you going to read Laura's response to your question?
Yeah.
Yep. Are you okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, we did it collaboratively, so.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because emails are, there's a privilege there. I just want to be attentive to
Yeah.
that. Okay.
So, and Chris helped with us with responses
Yeah.
as well.
It's
Okay.
it's not long, but I think it's a great answer. I mean, I'm not trying to do anything bad.
I know. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, because an email is a privilege
Okay.
kind of thing.
Well,
But if
okay.
it's permitted by the
so-
participants, then good luck.
Okay, so I asked, how does the Garrison District train and guide staff, faculty, and administrators with regard to their own behavior so that it is suitable toward children? And Laura answered, we begin each school year with appropriate safety and DASA trainings, which applies to all student and staff interactions. In addition, our work in social emotional learning, I'm sorry. And developing capacity in emotional intelligence is part of our ongoing PBIS, DBT, and Yale Ruler collaboration. Embedded within all of these programs are additional strategies and approaches in optimally supporting and addressing students. So I wanted to share that because I think that's an important thing for us to know that as a community. So thanks for answering.
Thank you. It was a collaboration, Chris,
Yeah.
Alex, and myself.
Questions for our
I've got two.
presenters?
One, just out of curiosity, I would imagine you get more complaints from the middle school, but
You imagine correctly.
having gone through one round of middle school parenting
Yes.
already, do you get many from elementary school? Is it heavily weighted middle? Okay, I'm not trying to relate.
No. And I would say, no, very, very infrequently, if at all.
Okay, interesting. And then I'm just curious, going back to a slide in your presentation, Chris, it was just talking about the procedure. So that the principal writes up an annual report and summary of, I guess, all DASA complaints, gives it to the superintendent. I'm curious of what, if any, what the board role is in that. Does the board receive any information about how many DASA complaints there are a year? Or not, but it's not policy. Is that something that would come from the superintendent? Would that be?
Yeah, it's
Private.
not required,
What do
it's
we
not
need to
part of the
know, I
process,
guess?
but it
Yeah.
certainly can be.
I
I
mean,
don't know how.
Seems
yeah.
like it would inform climate of the
Yeah.
school.
Yeah,
Is that something that we should write into policy that should happen?
No, I think it's just something, because you're not gonna get information on individual cases.
No, of
That's-
course
it's
not,
just
and that's.
numbers, you could just ask for numbers, yeah.
Well, and just for reference, and it
And
was
Sarah
for-
did.
I did it, yeah.
Right.
You
Oh,
share
okay.
the numbers. I think you should share them.
Yeah,
Because
so-
they're-
So,
Right.
so it's, thankfully it's minimal. 4 filed, 1 founded, 3 unfounded.
And this was for the 2018,
2019.
2019 school year.
Which we
Right.
report to a system called Vader.
Mhm.
And
That's
that's where
an
it lives.
unfortunate thing. Yeah.
Vader.
Right.
Sorry.
VAIR.
But this is to underscore part of David's, well, to support some of the things David might be saying, implying, and that is, let's say there are, I don't know, hundreds of unpleasantries that occur, right? One, there are 4 that, 4 of those have risen to the point where someone's filing a concern, and 1 was deemed founded, correct? So, you know, these are those big issues are a big deal, but that's not the majority of, let's say, injury. I'll put that in quotes, big rabbit ears. That's occurring, right? And the majority of possible injury actually has to be addressed.
Well, I think to credit of your administrators, they're probably taking care of the issues before they rise to the level of a DASSA violation. We don't
Right.
wait, you don't sit back and say, oh, it's not that big a deal yet, we'll let it see where it goes. You nip it in the bud so it doesn't get to that point. So that, that's, you're right. I'm sure they deal with, things between students every day. They don't let it arise to that level.
And I would venture to say too that I really thank you, but I think really the credit is due to our amazing teachers and teacher aides because they're constantly involved in having those conversations and taking advantage of the teachable moments so that these things don't escalate. And I think that if I did not have that level of support and also the collaboration of wonderful clinical and then Ms. Diego as well, all of those layers and personnel matter. So I think that yes, the training is important, but I think there's an incredible amount of knowledge and just understanding of what our kids need. And I think one of the less formal anecdotal pieces of evidence is during lunch periods. You can walk in, every other classroom is often filled during lunch periods with kids electing to have lunches with teachers, school counselors, school psychologists, because that's the culture that we've all worked to create. And I think that's all kind of one, it's all together. So when we were asking questions about how does it manifest itself and how we're teaching, those are all opportunities. So I really have to say that it's really a testament to the staff.
How much your day is dedicated to tracking this, behavior, discipline issues?
With DASSA specifically, or?
No, I mean minor, right? But I mean, DASSA sort of compels you a little bit to be a little more attentive is the deal, right? That's part of the legislative motive is just to
Right.
get people to focus a little harder. How much do you think your day is dealing with issues of behavior, discipline, follow-up, all that?
Thankfully, not a tremendous amount. I think a lot of the time is spent speaking with teachers and teacher aides and making sure that if anything I'm getting caught up or in the loop on something so that I'm aware. But most of those times when it's coming to me, it's already been addressed, or it's what do you think, or what are the next steps? It's a very collaborative process. So I think that actually, thankfully, a lot of my time is not, because that's not how I really want to spend the majority of my time either. I'd rather spend my time being of instructional support. So.
Questions?
That's why I like that when they're talking about classrooms, the supportive classroom slide that you have, Chris, because that's what teachers and teacher aides do. And within the classroom, saying that reporting is not tattling, teasing is not allowed, gossip and rumors are not okay. Promote a welcoming environment for all. Create a culture of respect. Treat all students equally. Model respect and civility. Look at the message you send, the materials you use, and what you post in your rooms. And use effective intervention strategies and act promptly to address an issue. Make it teachable moment. And that is so ongoing. I think that it may not be as a formal program, but it's a practice that works for our kids and our staff.
I would also add that, I think one of the things that we can do or that the school can do is create a sense of voice in every student. If they feel like they have a voice, they will issue forth. And it's no accident that this came on the heels of Tyler Clementi's suicide, who was harassed for his sexuality. And it's no accident that after the Florida massacre, that it was theater students and LGBTQ students who were leading the protests around the gun violence in that community. There's no accident. These are students who felt they had voice, and they possessed it, they owned it, and they felt like they could do it.
And our kids are being taught the importance of self-advocacy. So that, and it's difficult that, and I say to parents and say whomever our kids feel comfortable, they just need to have at least one person here and at one person at home, so that we have those, the kids feel safe when they're here and they feel like they have people or multiple people that but it does come from, and that's a difficult thing to develop. That's something that we do really try to empower our kids to feel comfortable doing.
I just have one question on the reporting side. If a middle schooler or even an elementary school student wants to make a report, do they have to go to the website? Are the forms available, like in your office, in Krista's office, to just grab a piece of paper?
They are,
write
but
it out?
I think that we could. They're most readily available through the website, but they are available in the office as well. And we've had some instances where if parents were either reporting something. I mean, last year we went so far as that we really helped them basically completed the form and said, does this look like accurately how you're reporting the incident? The parents said yes. So I mean,
most of the time, I would say it comes verbally from students. They don't go get the form
They
and
don't have
report
to.
it. Then the form is filled out with parents or with
I
students.
just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence to
Mhm.
make
Yeah.
sure it's all available to the students and they know that this is the process should they need to file a complaint.
Even more, they need to know they can go to someone. You know, they're not going to go and fill out a form necessarily, but they will go to someone and talk to them, and that's where usually it starts, at least in my experience. It starts with a verbal conversation, not somebody coming with a completed form and saying, here's my complaint. You know.
Can we pivot to the public comment? Is that doable, folks? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
We put public comment after a presentation so that the public can have direct questions to our presenters. If the public has any, please follow our public comment policy, not mentioning personnel or individual student names or anything like that, and keep your comments to a minimum. We'd like you to announce who you are. If there are any comments or questions regarding the presentation.
Great presentation. But it's not about that.
We have a second public comment? We don't. This is it? Okay.
Or is there anyone else?
It is not.
Okay,
We
so
don't
Chris
have-
should go.
Yeah, I think,
So can I just say, Chris, thank you.
Yes, thank
This
you.
is my last board meeting, and I want to say thank you for your support, your expertise, your experience. I was a new superintendent, and now I'm a wealth of information because of you.
You were awesome.
And you always work in the benefit of the district. So we really I appreciate your support, but I think the district really appreciates your support. So thank you. So have some wine. Enjoy your family.
make sure you get home first. Stay hard. Stay hard.
Yeah, you too. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everyone.
Thank
too.
you.
Okay, so we do have a public comment open. We don't have a second public comment. Crystal, if you'd like to comment, yeah, feel free.
I'm Crystal Ford. It's been a while. I missed you guys. So first, I just wanted to say, Laura, I'm going to miss you, and it's been a pleasure working with you the last 2 years. A general announcement, the GSEF gave another grant for the Youth Climate Summit, so that is going to go forward for next year, May 15th, 2020. We'll probably start planning with the students and Mr. Keegan after the holidays get back. And so then, since we're doing such amazing work, I wanted to bring up electric school buses. And specifically, I want to talk about electric school buses because diesel is really bad for our kids to be breathing in. Aside from like the whole climate issue, there's like a lot of tiny particles that our kids are breathing in on the 30 minutes one way that they're on the bus. So like twice a day, they're just sitting there breathing this in. There's a lot, I can send you studies, but there's a lot of stuff shown like that diesel buses can impact our kids. But then also the financial incentives for electric school buses, they show that over the long term you actually do save money. I do know you don't own your school buses, so I had a couple of questions and I wanted to know like how long the school bus contracts are for. Do you have any sway to put pressure on them to provide you with electric school buses? And can we consider like maybe like buying our own and like phasing it in? So those are my I'm planting the seeds for electric school buses.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
as we generally don't answer questions. Right?
Yeah.
But someone will get back to you through the proper channels. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. So, welcome back.
Thank you very much. The 4-H veterinary science class is over, so I'm free on Wednesday evenings again.
Congratulations. You don't have to make the drive.
It's a rough drive, especially in the snow.
I'm Jesse Lunan Pack. I have two kids here at the school, Gabe in 8th grade, Seth in 6th grade. I have a lot of not fully formed opinions about that presentation, so I'm not going to talk about it until I've more fully formed them, but I'll share those with you at another time. What I wanted to talk about publicly tonight is something, James, you and I actually discussed this informally, and I know you disagree with me, so I apologize. I hope we'll still be friends.
Yeah.
It makes my wife, given everything that's going on in the world, it makes my wife and I very uncomfortable that the Garrison School is one of the few, if not only, schools in the county that does not have a dedicated school resource officer here in the building. I know as part of the PISA bonding that we have security enhancements to the physical security of the building in plans, but I also know that's not going to take place for a couple of years. I believe, Laura, you told me it was the latter half of the construction project. And I just think that given everything going on in the world and how often we hear of unspeakable tragedies happening everywhere, but most specifically in our schools, that this is something that should be discussed, so that the fact that we don't have an officer here is not by inertia, but it's because we discussed it and we decided it was not appropriate for our school for whatever reason. I would challenge you on that, but that's okay. So that's just the issue I wanted to raise with you guys tonight, and hope that you guys can add that to your discussion at some point. Thank you.
Just to clarify, this was a coffee shop commentary, and my voice is only one. So
Absolutely.
In that coffee shop commentary, I don't represent the board, just one member on it with an opinion.
I never thought you did.
Okay, I just want to be transparent that I was not representing the
We're
board.
going to take you out behind the gym later.
Okay. Thank you all. President's announcements, just a few. We'll be having some communications regarding the search for permanent superintendent, and we'll be welcoming the interim superintendent on January 2nd, Dr. Deborah Jackson. I wanted to congratulate the modified sports teams for their seasons. Congratulations, everyone, for working hard. And I also want to congratulate both O'Neill and Haldane for their, I know national rankings in U.S. News World Report isn't the best thing in the universe, but they did very well in their rankings, and O'Neill finished as the highest in Orange County. So just to let you know, I wanted to give a shout out to our neighboring districts. Okay? And Laura?
Yep.
Superintendent's remarks?
Yep, have three things. First, study teams. We launched our first study team curriculum, and we had about 10 people at the table representing instructional technology, literacy, environmental education, and math, which were determined those four. And it was a great conversation. We're really excited about
especially staff, leading this work, blazing this trail. Study teams are new to us. I don't know if they're new to other districts, but we feel like putting the power in the hands of the teachers and allowing them to explore and expand and visit and have conversations about what's going on here on the ground, and then being able to find a place to share with the community and families and get input, as well as ongoing reports by principal during board members, so you know what's going on over time, whether something, they accomplished something or not, and why. What are the barriers, and how can we work together in finding solutions? So the next one is tomorrow, and that's social emotional, and then communications will be next week. Then once we have met with all of them, the idea is to bring it back to the full staff and start generating ideas. What are the subcomponents of those study teams? What are the what's the foci over the next 4 or 3 years? And coming up with a timeline, accountability, tools, roles, and responsibilities. And so we'll keep you abreast of that. And then we also have an environmental education discussion group that's scheduled for January 17th. And then we're supposed to have the play area enhancement user group based on the suggestion by Garrett to start talking about that as soon as possible. Not everybody was able to come today, so we're going to try to make it happen next week. And we'll dial you in, Jill, if you're available.
That would be great.
Yes. And then then the team will meet again, that user group will meet again in January, as well as the other user groups. For design, that's the design around the PISA capital project. People forgot what that is. Did I cover everything? Okay. And then just the searches, the personnel searches that we have. We just posted district clerk on OLAS. And we're also going to put it in the newspapers, penny saver, get the word out, make the, canvass the area. And then we also posted confidential secretary to the superintendent today as well. And so we'll also cast a net. And I always say, not cast a net, cast a net. We did identify, you'll see later on, thank you for laughing, Alex, a grade 1 long-term substitute for Kimberly Katz, who's going on maternity leave until the end of the year. Her name is Papa Burr, so you'll see her name. We just identified 2 aides as well to replace a staff member who went to another district for another opportunity. So we wish him well, Matthew Evans, and then to another aide to help support our 3rd grade, who has been struggling with some dynamics in the classroom. So based on conversations with the principal, Alex, school psychologist, school counselor, teachers who are teaching 3rd grade, just felt like this is a good recommendation. And it may look different in the future. Maybe that class gets separated in the future into 2 sections. Maybe there's a teaching assistant. I mean, there have been a lot of conversations of how to further support this class, or this might just be enough to help. And then lastly, we are in the process of searching for a Spanish teacher. An email went out to middle school parents regarding where we are in the process. Tomorrow we have a couple of demos. We hope to identify a candidate soon. Miss Jennifer Chagoya has been very flexible and nice to stay with us until we identify somebody so that the transition is smooth for our students.
That's great.
And then lastly, I wanted to share, do it fast.
Go for it.
I wanted to take a moment to share with the board and the public a letter that I shared with staff about the many accomplishments that have occurred over the last 5.5 years. Now, under my leadership, but it also just came from this amazing staff, and I just wanted to celebrate all of those accomplishments and let everybody know that all of these things are happening, and that yeah, we complain, and sometimes we come from the deficit model, and but there are great things, and I think we want to make sure that we take time to celebrate them and also address the things that just aren't going well. And I think that's a good balance, and that should be a practice for all and beyond.
Take as much time as you want.
Okay, thank you. I put my glasses on. So, I said I wanted to take a moment to read the letter that I wrote to the amazing Garrison School District staff when announcing my departure, to give the board and the public a strong understanding of the Garrison School and everyone in it has what they have accomplished, both big and small, in the last 5.5 years. So this is it. Dear all, I'm extremely proud of the many things we accomplished together over the past 5.5 years. On top of all the good work in place before I arrived, there were lots of things happening that were amazing. We now have a cohesive scaffolded literacy curriculum across grades, K-8. We have publishing parties in classroom libraries. We have one-to-one student Chromebook devices in grades 3 through 5. We have the adoption and implementation of positive behavior intervention program, PBIS, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, district-wide training in therapeutic crisis intervention in schools, TCIS. We have the adoption of STAR 360, Fountas and Pinnell, Blackboard, Board Docs, Go Guardian, District My Learning Plan, School Dismissal Manager, and Google Drive in Classroom. We have flu clinics and we have comfort dogs. We have new furniture in every elementary classroom. We have 17 members on our emergency response team, unheard of in other districts, and a parent safety brochure that was created by our own staff. We have a substitute handbook and orientation. We have new interactive boards in every classroom. We have Unity Day and Midsummer's Night's Dream. We have Twitter and Facebook. We have 2 interventionists now. We have farmers markets, green classroom, makerspace program, debate, Chris in the back, composting, circus week, student government, and a climate action group. Crystal, thank you for being part of that. We're on our second round of district priorities, which was created out of the board who allowed us to work on the district priorities as a staff and bring them to you. And now we have exciting study teams. Thank you for allowing us to do that as well. And we have a $9.9 million capital project. And I can go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on and on and on. And most importantly, a staff that cares deeply for education, community, and students. It's truly been a pleasure and an honor working with each and every one of you. And I'm a better person and a stronger leader because of you. Thank you for your good energy, sense of humor, hard work, creative ideas, support, and ongoing care for our students. I miss you already, but onward. I also want to thank Ray O'Rourke and the 2014 board for giving me this very special leadership opportunity. I want to thank Dennis Mazuka and the PCNR for your accurate reporting and ongoing support over the years.
Dennis.
And I have some wine for you.
All right.
And to Richard Redmond, the man behind the camera, for your professionalism and for modeling what it means to be a proud American by participating in our Veterans Day event each year and saying the Pledge of Allegiance at each board meeting with volume, passion, and confidence. And then it was to Chris, too, who had to leave. I also wish the current board much success in finding a leader that will see your vision come to fruition. It has been a pleasure working with you. Thank you for the flowers, for the food, and for the wine. You obviously know me very well. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I wish we could end there.
Okay, we're good now, right?
We're good now, right? We'll let board comments take care of that. Okay, consent agenda, I need a motion.
So moved.
Yeah, to approve the consent agenda. Second?
Second.
Okay, be it approved, the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District approves the consent agenda items 7B through E. Is there any questions on any items B through E? I do have a question about the intermunicipal agreement with Putnam County. Does that mean that we'll have, this is a really bureaucratic question, followed that by that inspirational comment. Does that mean that we'll have more frequency of sheriffs stopping by, sheriff patrols, with this agreement? Is this something we do every year?
It's something that it used to happen every year, and then for some reason it fell to the wayside, and now it has reappeared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great. Yeah. All right, terrific. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Discussion item, committee updates. I think we just did those, didn't we? Any other committee updates?
Can I kind of just, you gave your great letter, so I didn't want to ask this clarifying question. Are the study teams at this point just staff, right?
It's just staff right
I
now.
just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
So there's committees and study teams. The study teams are staff.
Study teams are staff.
Committees can be populated by staff and parents or community members or whoever, right?
And the committees that have study teams may change form. It may be more of a parent community session
Right.
where there's dialogue.
Right, like you have one coming up in January, so it's the discussion group.
Well, that's an environmental education discussion group. Yeah, I guess it could fall under that.
Right. That's good.
Because with environmental education, it's so big that I feel the study teams, and I don't want to commit them yet, but we've started throwing the idea around, like, identifying what we're doing environmental education-wise, K through 8. Because sometimes we're like, sort of, we know we have it, we just don't have it housed somewhere that we can say, this is what we do in K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And these are the events we have, and these are the resources and the materials. So to have that as sort of the foundational information. And then there are other pieces of the committee that may be events, like the climate summit, and that needs a lot of planning, and that maybe parts of that environmental education discussion group can do part of that. And then the forest is a big deal, and I worry about our forest, and I want our forest to have a maintenance plan. I was hoping to help facilitate that with BOCES, but maybe that group can help either reach out to BOCES again or find another group of people who can help because it does need a maintenance plan.
Is it the maintenance of the trails or the maintenance of the property in general?
I think both.
Okay.
I think both. But BOCES has a forestry program
Right.
with high school kids, and I think it would be a great opportunity then to develop a plan as part of their coursework, and then help implement it. I mean, these kids have a lot at their fingertips to help us make that happen. So that would be a nice partnership, but we'll see.
One other thing, I forgot to mention in the announcements, Haldane is having its strategic planning meetings this week. There's one tomorrow night, one the following week, and where they're doing a coherence plan, and they're representing to the public the results of the survey. So you might want to be apprised of that. Okay, just want to make that announcement. Approve the we need action items. This is item, not agenda item 9. Action items. We need a motion to appoint the interim superintendent of schools.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District hereby appoints Dr. Deborah Jackson as interim superintendent of schools commencing January 2, 2020 until such time a full-time superintendent is chosen, but no later than June 30th, 2020, and approves the agreement dated December 11th, 2019. Be it further resolved that Dr. Jackson is hereby named as a member of the Joint Sick Leave Bank Committee in the Title IX, Section 504 ADA Compliance Officer during the term for her appointment and employment. And that last little rider is just, the superintendent here has many, many hats, and those particular things have to be named. Okay? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? The ayes have it. And congratulations to Dr. Jackson. We will welcome her, and I'm sure we will have sessions, PTA will have sessions for people to meet Dr. Jackson, who is an impressive figure in education. So, item B, we're creating a teacher aide position. Need a motion to create it. Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, so we're creating this position for third grade, correct?
Support their grade.
Support our staff and our students in third grade. All right, so this is a new position. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the creation of a full-time teacher aide position. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain on this one, as I have a third grader, and I felt it was a little ethically across the line. I think this will while everything we do impacts my children in the district, but this directly impacts my child in an immense, wonderful way. I am very pleased with it, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
Okay, so we have one abstention. Please note that due to perceived conflict of interest, Sarah Tormey has recused herself from this vote. And I appreciate your sensibility regarding your boundaries. All in favor say aye. We did? Nays, one abstention, the ayes have it. Got lost in that little thread there, thank you. A motion to approve a teacher aide for leave replacement. Need a, yeah?
C.
Item C. I need a motion too.
So made.
Thank you. Second?
Seconded.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the appointment of Diane Metviner,
Yes. Oh my God.
bingo, as a teacher aide effective January 2, 2020. 2020. With benefits and compensation in accordance with the SRP contract, and approves additional work days prior to her appointment on December 13th and 20. Help me out here. Is that a typo?
December 13th and
The
20th.
December 13 and 20 piece? She's gonna work 2 days in December
Okay,
for
2019.
orientation and.
I got you.
Yep.
At her regular daily rate of pay. Got it. Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? Ah, gotcha. All right. Please note said abstention. Action item D, approve appointment of a long-term substitute elementary teacher. I see, we created and filled one, all in one shot. Well done, or 2 shots. Motion?
What do I say?
So moved.
So
Thank you.
moved. Seconded?
Seconded.
Yeah. All right. This is a lot of whereas, eh?
Nah.
Whereas the district is in need of a certified elementary teacher to fill a long-term leave of absence in grade 1, and whereas Patricia Revert
Go French.
I'll go with the French. Javert was the most qualified candidate for such position, and whereas due to the fact that the initial substitute pay set forth in the current board policy is not sufficient, therefore the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approves the appointment and employment of Patricia Revert effective December 16, 2019, as a long-term substitute elementary teacher, grade 1, to fill a leave of absence. Ms. Revert will be paid at the rate of $150 per day from the first day of employment to for the first 20 days, amending the initial payment amount set forth in policy 6221, long-term teacher substitutes, for Ms. Revert's appointment as a long-term substitute only, commencing on the 21st day of her long-term substitute appointment. The terms of policy 6221 shall apply. Did you all get that? We have a policy, we're amending that policy in order to satisfy this particular need, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Nays? And abstentions, the ayes have it. Item E, approve expenses for superintendent search.
I'm going to recuse myself from that vote because I'm the beneficiary.
No, you're not.
These are the ad buys.
These are the ad
Oh,
buys.
sorry.
We're not clear on that one, but we'll go to it. You don't have to recuse yourself. All right? This has to do with the...
So moved.
Thank you. Be it resolved, the Board of Education Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves advertising expenses for the superintendent search in the amount of $1,145 as per the retention agreement dated November 20th, 2019 between Garrison USSD and district-wide search consultants. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? And the ayes have it. Board member comment.
Can I say 2 things?
Go for it.
Are we missing a teacher aide position?
One was approved in the consent agenda, appointment of teacher aide.
We did.
Okay,
And then the
okay,
other
I
one is
missed that
there's
one.
a new position.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Okay. And number 2.
We never miss anything.
Just checking.
With Beth on the job, it was covered. Yeah.
I really appreciate the board approving the creation of a teacher aide mid-year. That's never really what you want to do, but after incremental support and finding out that it wasn't doing what we needed it to, we really needed this extra person. So thank you very much. I think it will benefit this group and these teachers immensely. So.
Yeah, I hope it communicates to all involved that the board stands in relationship to supporting the employees and the students here. And when called upon, we have to do due diligence on the fiscal end, but in no way are we supposed to be preventing such, improvement for our students and growth for our students. So I hope that's what communicates.
Thank you.
Who knows? Okay, board member comment?
I have two.
Go for it.
Well, I just want to, first of all, acknowledge the fact that as a Haldane parent and as also as a board member, that last weekend, the Haldane Theater Program did a performance of the Laramie Project, which is an extraordinary work, which has to do with the murder of a gay young man in Laramie, Wyoming, sometime around the year 2000. And I don't know if you folks have seen the work that the Haldane Theater Department has done, but it's really extraordinary. And it was incredibly courageous, I think, and appropriate, and very much in the spirit of the original purpose of the DASA Act to stage this. And as the father of a young lady who performed in it, I felt tremendous pride in her, but also great appreciation for what the Haldane District is doing in theater. It's really extraordinary. That's my first comment. The second is, Laura, you know, you've been here for, what, 5.5 years, and you're just such an incredibly decent human being, and a gracious, gracious woman. And, you know, lots of good things have happened, and you've enumerated a number of them since you've been here. Some things still left to be done. But I just, at a personal level, just wish you the absolute best, because you really deserve the best. You are a fine human being.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have two things. So first, I just wanted to kind of harken back to last meeting's presentation on the standardized testing data, which we all saw, and just acknowledge that the disparities that existed between cohorts, say, that I noticed and wanted to make sure that the district is following up on and addressing. And I know standardized tests definitely don't say it all, and there's many other ways to look into how our students are performing and learning and achieving. So I'm looking out for it, and I want to make sure that it's addressed and that all is being done so that our students are entering into high school and graduating with all the support they need, socially, emotionally, but also academically. And so my second point is that I corresponded with Laura about this, and so this is just recognizing that in my short term on the board so far, you've been so responsive to every single set of questions I've sent, and I appreciate that. And I can't imagine that you'd be able to keep this up because you have been so responsive. So I really appreciate the few months that I've really been trying to push some questions that you've really taken the time to respond.
So good, they're all good questions, and I have a team that helps me. I can't say
And
it's all me.
I appreciate the team too, and so good luck.
Thank you.
As we move on. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, I'm going to be an interim superintendent in Millbrook, so I'm excited about my new adventure. So sad to see you all, sad to leave, but I'm excited to try new things.
They're getting a good one.
Okay. I have two things too. I like this.
Holy moly.
First, I'd like to congratulate the Garrison Children's Education Fund on raising over $20,000 in their fall appeal this year. It certainly was more than I ever did when I was president of the Education Fund. I'm very proud of them.
You did a fine job.
So I'm very pleased, and I know they'll put that money to great work. And I would encourage everyone in the community, parents, teachers, to write grants to them and help them spend that money now that they have it. And then I wanted to address, David had brought up a movie he had asked us all to watch over the break, The Most Likely to Succeed. And it focuses on the changes in education. It's available on Amazon Prime, I should say that in case anyone wants to watch it. And it looks specifically at a charter school in California that has moved to more of a project-based learning model.
Public charter school.
A public charter school. And while I recognize that we're in New York, definitely different laws, as we saw tonight, we're not a charter school. I saw ideas and methods of teaching there that were really exciting. And I'm not a teacher. I know there are some on this board who could address this better than I, perhaps. But I also saw things in this movie that I felt were very familiar. things that I see from my children's classrooms coming home, or what the PTA does with certain programs like Destination Imagination, so, which I just am a big fan of. But so I'd like to continue the conversation, especially as we continue to look at curriculums and things, and also hear more about the things that harken to this project-based learning that are already happening here, and how we can support them further. I know it's like a lot of it's just a teacher has an idea and they want to run with it, but how can we all come together, and how can the board, this is more for you, Alex, I think, support those learning initiatives, the great ideas the teachers have in some of these. So I hope you'll come back to us with more ideas on that. And if you haven't watched the movie, it's awesome.
And the book's good.
Yeah.
Well, I read the book. Looks excellent. Sorry, that
I
was
was
a long
gonna
one.
make I no longer
Sorry.
have a comment. I was gonna make.
You must have two comments.
No, I need two, right. Well, the first, I was gonna,
Right?
what's that?
You have a teacher view to offer
On the movie,
Yeah.
which I rewatched. Well, the first comment I was gonna make was the GSEF comment. So that was gonna say the exact same thing. I was gonna congratulate that. $20,000 figure sort of struck me. So I'm glad you said that. I rewatched I had watched the movie in professional development when it came out. And again, I almost was going to say a lot of word for word what Sarah just said, so I won't bore everybody, but on both sides, the stuff that's innovative, but also I think highlighting things that are actually already happening. And I would encourage further conversation about project-based learning and also diversified learning and the importance of having kind of all of the above, and making sure that in the impulse toward project-based learning, we keep in mind what some of the teachers in the movie said, which is that different students learn differently, and that encouraging our teachers and our administration and whatever they want to do to fulfill what they already know about that, which is how do you do two things at once? How do you do the project-based learning for the students who respond most to that, while not letting go of the things that the other students respond to? Anyway, we were thinking we didn't chat about this, but we were thinking very similarly.
Okay, we good? Yeah, I think, Jill, you have a comment?
I have a comment. I want to thank Laura again for your receptivity to everybody's ideas. People have come to you with lots of ideas about trail riding in the school forest, about any number of things, whether they are parents or community members who wanted to partner with the school, and you always listened to people and gave them your time, and then acted on things that felt like they were right for the district. So thanks for listening to everybody, and thanks for nurturing both the children and the staff.
Thanks, Jill.
I saw the performance of the Army Project, and it was very powerful and very difficult. Here, we have a wonderful Depot Theater program, and that feeds talent that ends up performing these rather impressive, having these impressive performances at Haldane.
But there was no Dasa theme in the elf story.
No. Well, there should have been, but no.
Right.
But you know, it just goes to show you that when the community, our interesting partners are powerful partners like the Depot Theater, like the Rec, GSEF, and when we all work together, we can have a moment like that where you see parents, adult actors in the community that aren't even parents coming to see these kids and seeing them crying, with no personal at stake in this, being moved by these performers who are, because it's such a small community, are also soccer players, also basketball players, also, they're athletes, they're actors, they're musicians, they're students. It's just really heartwarming to see that kind of caliber of performance coming from such a small pool. I think I was counting something like 275 4th through 7th graders were eligible to be an ELF Junior, and there are 2 casts made up of about 50 actors for a community theater. That's a huge percentage of the population, available population, to be involved in something like that. I think it's great. think it's great, and it's great, whatever we can do, how we can relate to, whether it's Hudson Valley Shakespeare or the Depot Theater, in our theater teachers and as a school district, how we can all work together to enhance those experiences is just wonderful. That's about it. We need a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, everybody.
All in favor, say aye.
I'm saying
And
aye.
we're there. Enjoy your
Dave.